He was 22 years old, riding his horse south of Corpus Christi, where the U.S. Army had established a beachhead. He was in the region that would be called the King Ranch, but that now legendary, sprawling ranch would not be founded for another 20 years. This vast stretch of sandy prairie was then known as the Wild Horse Desert. In some ways, it was a spooky place, ghostly. Visitors could see horse tracks everywhere, but no people. There were plenty of well-worn trails, but the population was only four-legged. Folks reckoned that these horses were the descendants of the ones that arrived with Cortez or De Soto almost 3 centuries earlier. Some of the horses escaped and bred like rabbits, if you can say that about horses. Our young man, a graduate of West Point and a newly minted second lieutenant, rode with a regiment of soldiers under the command of General Zachary Taylor. They were under orders to establish Fort Texas on the Rio Grande and enforce that river as the southern boundary of the United States. Fort Texas would shortly become Fort Brown, the fort from which Brownsville, Texas, would take its name. The young lieutenant, who had excelled as a horseman at West Point, was so impressed with the seemingly infinite herds of wild horses in South Texas that he made a note in his journal. He said, "A few days out from Corpus Christi, the immense herd of wild horses that ranged at that time between the Nueces and the Rio Grande was directly in front of us. I rode out a ways to see the extent of the herd. The country was a rolling prairie, and from the higher ground the vision was obstructed only by the curvature of the earth. As far as the eye could see to the right, the herd extended. To the left, it extended equally. There was no estimating the number of animals in it. I doubt that they could have been corralled in the state of Rhode Island or Delaware at one time. If they had been, they would have been so thick that the pasture would have given out the first day." Both General Taylor and his second lieutenant would distinguish themselves on that journey through South Texas, as they enjoyed victories in the first battles of the Mexican-American War at Palo Alto and Resaca de la Palma. Taylor had no idea that his travel through the Wild Horse Desert would lead him on to victory in Mexico and to a political victory back home. He would become the 12th President of the United States. Taylor's dashing second lieutenant would also ascend to the presidency 20 years after him. The young man on high ground, surveying the astounding scene of wild mustangs grazing by the thousands, would become the hero of many battles. He would ultimately lead the Union forces to victory in the Civil War and become the youngest president of the United States. His presidential memoirs would become a runaway bestseller, published by Mark Twain, who would describe the book as the most remarkable work of its kind since Caesar's Commentaries. It was written by Hiram U. Grant. Well, that was his birth name. But when he entered West Point, a clerical error deleted the name Hiram and added an S as his middle initial, which stood for nothing. The result was the name you know him by, Ulysses S. Grant. For Texas Co-op Power Magazine, I'm W.F. Strong.